So I've been responding to students in a couple of my online classes, and I was chatting with a photographer about how she took a landscape photography class in the past. And the teacher was so focused on the rules that it just felt really strict and really overwhelming, you know? And the problem she was talking about was that she has carried those rules forward. So now, when she's out in the field photographing, she feels really restricted by those things. Like she's constantly doing things like looking for a point of interest, but it's like there's a beautiful scene, but what's the point of interest? There's kind of not one, and I need that because that's the rule that you have to have one, right? And then I have to have leading lines, and there has to be the rule of thirds, right? And so suddenly you were just out walking in the forest or something, you're trying to be present and to enjoy yourself, and you really would love to be caught up in the beauty of that whole experience, and you want to make some photographs that capture that experience and that spirit of that space. And so, do you really want to be triangulating all of those different rules and carrying 50 different rules in your head every time you're making a photograph? And it's like you recognize, like this student was talking about, she really recognized that was not serving her, but that it's hard to unlearn at a certain point because it's kind of like an operating system that got installed, and maybe it even feels like it's your original operating system because it was taught to you really, really early on in your practice, like at the very beginning when you first got a camera in your hands. And so you just took it for granted that that's the way it's done, right? This is the way you make photographs. You need all these rules. And sometimes teachers can be really, really convincing when they teach the rules. Like they're in a position of authority, and they're telling you that this is the way it's done. It's all very serious. And so we tend to believe people when they present information to us like that, right? But say you went to an interpretive dance event, and when you got there, the person who was hosting it said, okay, you have to do these exact steps exactly like this, and all of us in the group here, we're going to do the exact same steps together, and if you don't do that, you're going to be wrong and bad. If that happened, probably a little voice inside you would pipe up and say, wait a minute, something doesn't seem right about this, right? I came here to do interpretive dance. Like, I thought we were just going to put on some really good music and then we could all just kind of wiggle and jump around any way we wanted, right? Like, that's what you expected. So you already have that intuition in you, right? You know that doesn't sound right. And so we really can take that same energy into our art. And I think it's really transformative to do that. I just think it's really nice to take a step back from all of this stuff if you're feeling pressure with rules, with the way things quote unquote should be done. If that's ever been a struggle for you, it's really transformational to ask yourself, does it make sense that in order to create really beautiful, visionary, truly creative art, does it make sense that the way to do that is to follow a set of rules? Just ask yourself that question. When I ask myself that question, it doesn't make any sense at all. It doesn't make any sense at all that if I want to create visionary art, I wouldn't do it like I was painting a paint by numbers kit. Those can be beautiful. My mom does a lot of those, but they're a totally different pursuit. And you would certainly never think that if you did a paint by numbers kit perfectly, right? You put all the correct colors in all the correct spots. You did it perfectly. You would never think that your painting might wind up in a museum and you would be hailed as a visionary artist, right? Of course not. That would never happen. And also, just like making unique art, if I want to make art that is really deeply personal and showcases my deeply personal vision, am I going to be able to achieve that by following somebody else's established rules or the rules that everybody else is using? Like, if I follow those rules perfectly enough, I'm going to come up with images that truly look like me, and I'm going to have a unique personal vision as an artist. That makes no sense, right? That makes no sense when we really speak it. It's kind of like if you followed a brownie recipe perfectly. You know, if I did that perfectly, I wouldn't wind up with a batch of brownies that's groundbreaking, and everybody would say, wow, Laura has this really unique flair with her baking, you know, and she should publish a cookbook. That wouldn't happen because I'm just following a recipe. It's the same as everybody else who follows that same recipe by and large, right? And we all understand that implicitly with this example, to the point that it sounds kind of ridiculous to point it out. But we make this mistake all the time with our art, where we think we can follow the same recipe as everyone else, or that we should follow the same recipe as everyone else. And if we do that, we'll wind up making images that win awards, or get us into galleries, or we'll sell a bunch of prints. Or even we make the mistake thinking that we can follow the same recipe and have a deeply meaningful personal practice and wind up with a personal vision where, you know, your images really look like you. And sometimes you follow recipes like this for a really long time, and you try to follow them more and more perfectly when you feel like they're not working. And then you get disheartened because even though you're knocking yourself out and you're doing everything perfectly, you look at your images and think, geez, these look like everyone else's, right? Because go figure, that is exactly what happens when everyone follows the same recipe to make brownies. So if you're doing things like blaming yourself for being less than, or not talented enough, or not original enough, or not cool enough, because no matter how perfectly you follow the recipe, you're not winding up with something unique, personal, and original. It's actually not about you at all. You're not a failure at all. You are just getting the very predictable result of following the same recipe that everybody else is following. I was just thinking about that today, and I know that there are a lot of people who feel really, really burdened by the rules and feeling like they have to follow them in order to make good images. So if you're struggling with these things, if you're hanging on to those rules, even though part of you kind of knows that they're not serving you, or if they're just so deeply established in your psyche that they've basically become your operating system, but you know you need a system upgrade, it's really, really helpful to ask yourself that question that I posed earlier to kind of poke holes in that resistance that you might have. So if you want to make visionary art, would you follow a set of rules and formulas in order to do that? Does that make sense? And I mean to literally ask yourself that, right? Literally dig into that a little bit. And I think just asking that question opens it up, and it's like, oh, wait a minute, that really doesn't make sense at all. And that's so freeing and so helpful. It's also kind of like, if I want to get to point B, where I'm making really visionary, personal, amazing art, am I going to follow a series of steps that leads way over to somewhere else to point C? You know, it's like the steps don't lead to where we want to go. So then why would we follow them? Maybe you've been trying and trying to get to point B, but you keep following those same steps. They keep leading you to point C, and it's really frustrating. But it's like, if I follow a recipe for chicken curry, I'm never, ever, ever going to wind up with a blueberry pie. Okay, so we all understand that. So the next question is, what do we need to get to point B then? What do we need? It can feel kind of scary to go off script. And that is a big part of the reason why we stick to the script, you know? So you take away all the rules, And then you're just standing there in terra incognito. There are no guideposts. And you think, what the heck do I do now? You can't just take away all the rules, Laura, and just leave me hanging here without any sense of direction at all. But that's the whole point, isn't it? That's the whole point, right? You cannot make visionary, deeply personal art with a uniquely personal vision by walking someone else's road and following all the turns on their map, or you wind up at their house, not yours. So we have to ask ourselves, are we so uncomfortable with the idea of having no path, of standing in terra incognito, that we would rather take directions that lead us to the wrong place rather than investigate terra incognito and make some really amazing discoveries for ourselves? It's like kind of like we're saying, give me structure, some structure, any structure, even if it's wrong, I'll take it. Just give it to me. It's worth looking closely at that tendency in ourselves, Like, does that feel familiar in your body when I describe that? Just clinging to some structure just to have structure, even when you realize that it might be wrong. Have you done that in other areas in your life? That can happen. And what if you were told that the only way to actually get to where you want to go is to stand in terra incognito by yourself? Because really the whole point is to stand there alone in the dark, to take a deep breath and just to investigate how that feels. What's that feel like in your body? I think the juicy part of being an artist is actually leaning into that experience and investigating what you need, what you want, what your body wants, what feels good to you in any given moment with your art. Here are some things I think can help crack the door open a little bit. Of course, I can't give you a new set of rules here, right? To fill in that terra incognito, you need to explore that space for yourself. You can absolutely do that. Don't give up because operating without rules seems loosey-goosey. This really is the juicy part of being an artist, right? If you toss the rules, it's like now you've really hit on something, This is the good stuff. This is where it starts. So I just want to share some things that might feel supportive to you as you sort of stare into the void. Here's some invitations. It's just some gentle invitations and some permission for you that might be useful little lights on the path. So this feels really important. Trusting yourself to make good decisions. Trusting yourself to make good decisions for yourself. Getting really quiet and seeing what your intuition has to say for itself, and then making the really kind of bold, amazing decision to act in accordance with your intuition. So no second guessing, no doubting, just trusting, just running with that, deciding that that's okay, that that's enough, that that's right. And really, when you think about it, this is art, right? So it's a pretty low stakes zone to practice with trusting your intuition more and being decisive more, right? It's a great space to practice that in. It's not like we're doing brain surgery. I think it also takes self-inquiry. So allowing yourself to investigate your own heart and mind a little bit and just seeing what's in there. So what does your taste look like? What do you like? What don't you like? And when nobody else is telling you what's good and what you should like and what's bad and what's wrong, what do you like unapologetically? And when you remove other people's opinions from your awareness, what do you like just for you? Really watch your mind here, because you might experience something like, you're out in the field and you're photographing and you've got this bright midday light and you just think, gosh, it just makes me so incredibly happy. But then a split second after that, you think, oh, no. Actually, I know that that's wrong. And everybody says you can't photograph at midday. I'm being really stupid. This is silly and dumb. I can't like that. Everybody knows that that's wrong. So let me think of something else that sounds better. No, 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 right? Watch yourself do that little backtracking thing and go back to the original impulse you had, that thing that you knew you loved. There was like this purity about that inner knowing that you had, that you loved this midday light, and that sparked something in you for just a second. That is the thing to follow up with. That's the thing. You'll be happier if you do that, and your images will look more like you. So really notice how you're editing yourself and then go with that initial impulse you had instead. Super transformational and helpful in finding your own vision, your own style, your own voice. I think it also takes slowing down. I think that can really, really help. So slow down so you can see deeply, so you can feel deeply, and so you can hear your little inner voice. Slow down and just breathe for a bit. Listen to what your body, your heart, and your mind know to be true. It can take some practice to listen like that, I think, because a lot of us have been socialized to really repress that inner knowing. So you want to just give yourself time and space to really listen deeply. And sometimes what that looks like is just stopping when you're out photographing. So I might be photographing out in a forest somewhere or something, and I recognize that my mind is a little bit messy. I'm not in the zone, and I just stop. And I take a deep breath. And maybe I lift my head up a little bit. I look at the sky. I feel the breeze on my skin. I just take a beat. I take a full minute, maybe two, I listen to the environment. I listen to my heart and mind, listen to my body, get in touch with the space, actually feel the place where you are, right? Then you're really immersed in the feeling of that place. You're not just approaching it kind of analytically. And when you're more present, you're likely to make images that have more presence. And slowing down really, really helps. I think it also takes really gentle noticing, like noticing when those external rules and voices and shoulds come up in yourself, giving yourself a compassionate little mental hug, like, oh, there that is again. There that is again. Let's just gently let it all go. Let's tune back into the present. What's happening in this gorgeous little place right here and now? Let's just notice those external voices and shoulds come up. Take a breath, consciously decide to let them go. I think another thing that's helpful is just giving yourself the permission to do really kooky experimental stuff, to play more, to see what happens. You have that permission completely. And you could ask yourself, what would I do if I were free of all those rules? If I imagine myself as a person who is free of all those rules that are burdening me, what would I do right now? What would I create right now if I wasn't afraid of going off script? And then do that. Just do that. No questions. Whatever that is for you. It's not looking at what I might do, right? Or looking at what another photographer is doing or what they think is cool. That's another script that's not your own. So now you're figuring out who you are without the rules that other people have imposed on you. Who are you, right? Who would you be if you were free of all those rules? What would you do? Go do it. That can take some practice, right? But that's okay. That's okay. I think that feels like a richer thing to practice with and a much more interesting thing to practice with. And it really can be a lifetime practice. I think if we just notice that old rules-based operating system when it comes up, it really is kind of like it's like an old operating system that's jamming up your whole system. It's like it's taking up a ton of space on your hard drive. And so you got to get it out of there because you're starting to realize it also has some viruses. And then there's no space to get creative when you're running someone else's program and it's taking up all the space on your drive. So if we toss it, we suddenly free up a bunch of space. And it's beautiful. And then we can hear ourselves think again. So, what are you going to do with all that space? And instead of being afraid of it, we can think, ooh, this is actually pretty neat. This is pretty neat. Now I get to figure this out. Now I have some room to stretch and play. That is true creativity. That space is so valuable. So, going back to our question that I think can really help to sort of blow down the resistance and to help you let go of the rules that you've been indoctrinated with in the past, just sit with this question. Really sit with it. I highly recommend journaling on it a little bit. Ask yourself, if I want to make beautiful, original, personal photographs, would I follow a set of established rules to get there? No? Why not? Why not? And how has a dependence on the rules not been serving you? How has it been hurting you? Such good questions to dig into. And then ask yourself, what's your unique, beautiful, personal, original recipe, right? And you're going to have to do a bunch of taste tests. and that's okay. That's part of the fun, right? It's not always going to turn out. You're going to make some funky tasting things on your way to truly finding your original perspective. But we're in this because we wanted to be creative, we wanted to make art. And so we're so lucky that we get to do this. We get to experiment like this. We get to taste the cookie dough instead of just buying some stale prepackaged cookie off the shelf somewhere, So yeah, go investigate what happens when you toss the rules. What happens in your body, what happens to your vision, what happens to just your sense of freedom, your sense of possibility. I know that it is so, so tempting to think that somebody out there knows better. But the invitation here is for you to believe that actually you are the one who knows better. It's you. That person is you. Even when you don't know what you're doing, you're the one who knows best when it comes to your own art. I really want you to believe that. It's so, so true. And I think believing that changes everything about what you do as an artist. If you run into anything that feels tough or unwelcome or scary on this journey, investigate that too. That is really worthwhile. So ask yourself things like, why does it feel scary to let go of that rule or to imagine that it's not as important as you were led to believe? Why does that feel scary? What's the resistance there exactly? What are you afraid of losing if you were to let go of that? And what might you possibly gain if you were truly free as an artist, right? What would you gain? It's so good to look at that. What would you gain if your practice was really free, really responsive, not burdened by rules and shoulds and expectations? And how could you take one step forward right now into that really juicy, really compelling, really beautiful space of possibility? There's some incredibly valuable insight there for you when you really start to look at those things. And I'm super excited for you to dig in there and just see what arises. Okay, I think those are my thoughts for today. I hope you guys have a really great day out there. Go and break some rules, okay? You got this. If you'd like to explore creative ideas like these in more depth as they relate to your own photography, there are many different ways to work with me. I have a series of online courses, most of which you can start as soon as you sign up. Some focus on the creative side of the practice, and some are more professional track classes. And I also do one-on-one mentoring with students around the world. That's where we'd meet on Zoom or phone and do a deep dive on your archives, on any challenges you're working through, your current projects and goals, and I'll help you gain clarity and momentum with those things. Mentoring will feel really helpful if you're stalled or unsure about your next steps. With all of my offerings, I bring 20 plus years as a curator, photographer, gallerist, professional portfolio reviewer, educator, and juror to the table. I give you all my best guidance and support. The links are below for all my current online classes and to schedule a mentoring session with me. And if you enjoyed this video, please share. It does help support the work I do. Okay, happy photographing out there. Be well.